Okay, so I got some new faces and some old faces. Not old faces, less new faces. The meditation tonight, especially if you're newer, is going to be very confusing to you. But we've got some just this has been the last week was one of the most exciting weeks of my entire life. I had so much fun, and I know that some of you guys got to see some of it. You weren't here last week, but you'll get to see the next one in 3 years. The two students who tested for their black sash, Doug and Steph and Doug, they've been practicing for 18 years. They are really incredible. And they actually started practicing with my Sifu many years ago. I had the pleasure of practicing with them in Michigan before I moved here. And I always thought, like, those two are really good. I wonder if they're going to get a black sash someday. And they finally did. And 18 years is longer than normal because they moved. They actually lived away from both of the schools in Colorado for years, and they came back and started practicing with us here. And I kind of made them start the black sash test all over again. And they just absolutely crushed it. They were so good. It was really fun having a lot of students from our school in Michigan come here and practice with us. Some of you got to practice with them. Some of you got to at least see them. And there is a ton of skill. So my Sifu's been practicing for 50 years. He's got many students who have been practicing with him for between 20 and 30 years. Our school has only been here for 11 years, but we are super lucky to have had many students from the Michigan school come here and practice with us. So Doug and Steph are not the only ones, but to have this, it's very rare for anybody to practice martial arts for such a long period of time. And it's very rare to have a newer school like ours to get to have all that kind of talent and just a great energy on the mats. So 11 years is, on one scale, just a blink of an eye, a drop in the bucket. Even for me, I've been practicing for 25 years, and 11 years is a long time, but still seems like yesterday when we opened the school. We actually first were located down the street, and then that space got too small for us. So we got this big, beautiful space with high ceilings and a little bit of airflow so it doesn't smell like feet. And it has been a really incredible journey for me and for the school. The students that have come through, my Sifu always likes to say, and I'll say this too, it becomes increasingly true the longer that we are around. Our greatest successes don't necessarily practice here anymore. Of course, our black sashes do, and they're certainly among our greatest successes. But we have people who have truly changed their lives through practicing either the physical practice or the internal part of our practice, and had to move away. They can't practice, and some of them still join us on Zoom. You got to see Tanya, who's usually practicing from afar in Paris. She's always here for meditation, even though it's like 4 a.m. for her, and we love it. She's on right now. And I would not consider her as having moved on. She has just physically moved to a different place. We have tons of people who practice with us for years or just a few months, and we're really touched by it. They'll send us letters sometime. I'll tell you about a student who we had, and I will not tell you his name because I don't know how much he would like that. But we had a student who called me, I want to say about 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago. And I had a very interesting conversation with him. He tells me, I'm going to jail soon. I was in a car accident where I was driving and I hit somebody. I actually got into a car accident and my passenger died. And I'm going to jail. And I want to be able to survive in jail. And so after talking to him for a little bit, I felt like this is, seems like a person who can really get a lot out of what we do. And so I invited him to come in and practice with us. He stayed for about a year and he went to jail. And he sent me letters while he was in jail. He's like, I started practice for the physical, ability to defend myself. And that's been great. I have not been attacked and I feel pretty safe in here, but it's really the meditation and the discipline and the focus and the ability to just be with myself that has really been the biggest benefit from practice. And I make this joke way too often, I'm sure I'm jinxing myself, but I think of it like I want to be that kind of person where if I am in jail or I am stranded on a deserted island, can I keep my sanity? Can I be okay just being there with myself? And it is truly a rare thing to be able to do. There is this study that they did, this psychological study where they took people and I'm going to totally butcher this, but they basically just had them sitting alone in a room, I think with a button, and they had the choice between just sitting there with their thoughts or pressing this button, which gave them a mild electric shock. And they chose to shock themselves rather than just sitting there in silence. And it was like ridiculous. Now, maybe I would try it just to see what the shock would feel like, but I feel like most of us, after especially years of practicing meditation, we kind of feel okay with being with ourselves. The untrained mind would rather shock its body with an electrical current than just sit. Somebody Google that study and tell me the details about it. But I thought this was a really great example of the kind of person who I think has moved on. He got out of jail after I think 1 year, came back and practiced with us for another year or two, and then was deported. So he's not for any additional crime; it was for the same crime. And I think is out there living a much better life than he would have before practicing martial arts. And so I'm not just talking about those of us who have been imprisoned and have had seriously challenging life experiences, but certainly we've got a lot of people who have moved on in the 11 years and are no longer practicing with us, but are still really getting a lot out of it. There are several black sashes. Those of you who have heard me talk about this know we've had, between the school here and the schools in Michigan, we've had, I would say, at least 15,000, could be between 15 and 20,000 students over the last many years. And there are now 13 black sashes. When I started, there were 0 black sashes at the schools. So we've really had a lot in the last few years. And still, it is a huge deal. You are 1 in 1,000 if you are a black sash. If you're somebody who just sticks around for that long, it is really incredible. And we've had several black sashes who have had to move away. The 2 black sashes who are doctors, Dr. Utar Natchet and Dr. Olinger, they've had to move other places and they don't have a place where they can practice regularly. But they still practice. They practice forms on their own. They meditate. They do what they can do. And I was talking about this with Stephen Brown while he was here, and I said like one of the more ridiculous things that I've ever said, but as soon as I said it, we were both like, yeah, that's right. I said, once you're a black sash, you can't not black sash. And what I mean by that is when you have been practicing for so long and it becomes like part of you and it's in your bones, you can't not be that way. Just because you're not in the dojo practicing doesn't mean now you're just, back to being an idiot the way you were before you practiced. You're still meditating, you have this mindfulness, you have the physical skills that you had before, but it transforms you on a deep, meaningful level. And some of you heard Doug and Steph talking about this idea that when you take the black sash test and you pass it and you put the black sash on, this is like a symbol that I'm going to practice for the rest of my life. It doesn't mean that you have to practice at this location for the rest of your life. And it might not even mean that you are practicing at a martial arts school, but you're practicing. And whatever you can make out of your practice is great, but you cannot go back to the way that you were. It's impossible. After you dig in and spend so much time, it really becomes a permanent part of who you are. So I wanted to talk about a couple of my favorite moments from the Black Sash test. First, just Doug and Steph. They're incredible. I can talk about them for forever. They're both really incredible technicians. You watch them move. They move so smoothly and so effortlessly. I told this story, I think it was on Saturday night. No, it was on Saturday during the day of the demonstration. When they started, Steph had this like decades-long dance career, and she was really very smooth and had incredible coordination. And Doug was like, just typical dude who hadn't really done anything before. And so she looked incredible when she started, and he was like, fine. And now they've been practicing for so long together. I think she's rubbed off on him a little bit, and he's just gotten so good that now they're like really both incredible. But I just thought that I would make fun of Doug in that way. Some of my favorite moments from the test itself. For those of you who have not taken one of the really hard tests before, you might not be able to conceive what this is like. It's really hard, and this is not typical of most martial arts schools. In many martial arts schools, you can get a black belt or a black sash in a couple of years, and in many schools, they don't make you take a test. So here, for every single rank, even a white sash, you have to take a test, just like Mary did last night, and it wasn't that easy, right? You looked pretty tired after we were done, but you stayed for jiu-jitsu anyway, because you got a strong attitude. Black sash test is ridiculously hard. It's a week long, and it's several hours every single night. So the first night they do 3 hours of forms. I'm not going to tell you all the details because I don't want to ruin the surprise for you if any of you ever practice long enough to take a black sash test. But they do a form which takes about a minute to 2 minutes to complete from the beginning to the end. And it's just really hard, solid techniques, and they're working really, really hard. Lots of cardio expended. They finish the form, they stand there, and they wait to hear, are you done with that? Or does Sifu yell, again? And they heard again many times. They did about 100 forms that night, and they were very tired by the end. Yet there was never a moment where I looked in either of their eyes and I thought, maybe they're about to quit. You don't get to this point and start thinking about quitting. They could have gone for probably 10 hours that night. We could have kept going until like 6 in the morning, and I know they would have kept going. They would have hated me, but they would have kept going. The next night we were working on joint locks, chin-off, throws, chokes, and they got to really show off their incredible technical ability. The details that go into all of this is really great. Doug has been really struggling with a back injury for a while now, I think for a year or more. And so he can fall pretty well, pretty regularly, but he could not have fallen like the hundreds of times that he needed to in that night to have them doing the fall. So they were just throwing the whole night, and they had some incredible partners from our school, because I don't think anybody was here from Michigan yet. They had some red sashes, and I made them throw Mike. Some of you have practiced with Mike. He's like this. He is not easy to throw, and they were awesome partners. They hit the ground and jump back up and go, 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 go. It was actually, I think, at least as hard for the partners who were falling as it was for the partners who were throwing, but really incredible to see them work like that. Wednesday night, we had a lot of people from Michigan here, and that was when they did sparring. Some of you have never done sparring before, but it's basically like you are there squared up, and they're trying to hit you, and you're trying to hit them, and you're trying not to get hit, and sometimes you get hit. Sometimes you get hit a little bit, sometimes you get hit a lot of it. And by the end of that night, it was intense. They had to go down a line of senior students, some of which had been practicing, some of whom had been practicing for almost as long as they had been, some of them even longer. We had some black sashes from the Michigan schools there. And it's rough to spar one person, but when you have to go down the line and spar like 10 people in a row before you get a break and everybody else is nice and fresh, it's rough. And one of my favorite moments of this sparring drill was Doug and Jeremiah Savage, who's one of the black sashes from Michigan, were sparring, and they started here and they like moved over to this side of the dojo, and then they moved over to this side of the dojo, and they both found themselves over here by the knife rack, where we keep, those of you who have not been in the dojo, we do not keep real knives out here on the mats, but we keep practice knives, which are still made out of wood and are dangerous enough if you don't know how to use them. And they both at the same moment just broke away from each other, grabbed a knife, and like went back like they were going to, and you're not supposed to do that. That's not a part of the drill, and we don't actually do that in class, but they both had the same thought at the same time. They're like, grab this knife and use it as a weapon. And then I made them put the knives away and go back to punching and kicking each other. But that was really fun. And this is part of what we learn in our practice, is this ability to be creative, to think on the fly like that. Grappling in jujitsu, sparring in kung fu, it is absolutely necessary. You cannot get stuck in your own brain and get stuck in the rut of doing the same thing over and over again, because it's very easy for them to figure out what you're going to do, and then they will absolutely own you. You've got to mix things up, and you got to be able to adapt to what your partner's doing. So that was a fun example of this, but this is one of the best lessons that I think we can learn from martial arts, is what seems like a challenge is an opportunity. And I learned this doing jujitsu once a couple of years ago. I was practicing with somebody who was about as experienced as me, and he just grabbed my ankle in this weird way that nobody had ever done before. I was just sitting there, and he grabbed my ankle, and I just like paused. I didn't know what to do because nobody had ever done that to me before. And he showed me something. He's like, oh, if I grab you like this, here's a technique that you can do. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But then I was like, oh, that's cool, because I had it like, this is a problem. He grabbed me, and my brain shuts down and goes like, this bad, and then you're stuck. But what we learn to do is to treat that as an opportunity. And when we see it that way, it actually opens up many different options for us. It teaches us how to be creative and to spontaneously respond in countless different ways. And this is such an incredible and valuable skill to have in life. Something that we are not generally good at as human beings. We love to get stuck in our ways. We love to be attached to doing things a certain way. And if this is why in self-defense, one of the ridiculous things that you can do to defend yourself when somebody's like sneaking up behind you to attack you, if you notice them, is you can just turn and say, what time is it? And they go like, huh? And then you can just run away, because they were attached to things going a certain way. They're going to try to run. I'm going to catch them. I'm going to grab them. I'm going to throw them on the ground. I'm going to stuff them in my car, whatever. None of this is them thinking. They're going to turn and ask me, what time is it? And so it like throws you off completely. So one of the things that we get through our practice is this ability to be unthrow-offable. Nothing throws us for a loop, because we are able to adapt instantaneously to whatever gets thrown at us. So when you're being a great partner, you should do all kinds of weird stuff to your partner so they get a chance to adapt well. There was another moment with Doug that was not quite as flattering. He got a couple of really rough flying side kicks to the solar plexus, and he went down, and he was like on the ground, and Jeremiah Savage, who had hit him with his flying sidekick, came over, and he like pats him on the back, and he's like, you got more in you, let's go. And so they get up and they keep going. And to their credit, neither Doug nor Steph ever really thought about giving up. They never really looked like they had to. They were really put through the ringer, but they kept going. They kept getting back up every time they got knocked down. Thursday night, some of you guys were here last week. Maybe all of you, except for you, were here last week for Sifu Brown's meditation talk, along with Doug and Steph, and they got to answer questions. And I honestly thought that it was going to be way harder for them than it was, but they were really good. And it's that same idea of just being able to adapt, and in the moment, whatever gets thrown at you, they were asked questions that they did not know ahead of time, and they did a great job of talking about their practice and what it means in their life and the kind of deeper parts of what we're doing here. It was really beautiful to see that. I was talking for weeks leading up to this about this idea of getting a huge crowd in here to make them nervous. And we had by far the biggest crowd we have ever had for not even a meditation class, but I think for any class we had ever had until Saturday's demonstration. And they didn't look nervous at all. They were like better because there were so many people here. They stepped up and they were just like really eloquent and great at speaking about our practice. So I loved it. And just anytime we get to hear Sifu Brown talk, I mean, he's just one of the most inspirational people on the planet. So I love that. He didn't know that he was going to be so involved with the different things we were doing, but when he got here, I was like, Sifu, you got to talk. My people need to hear you. He also, before that, taught a knife defense seminar, and just the way that he shows techniques and explains things is really above and beyond. So I'll tell you, it's not a secret. Sometimes I'm just out here doing my best Sifu Brown impression. I'm just like, I know he would be doing an amazing job of this. So I'm just going to copy exactly what I've seen him do in the past. And it usually works pretty well. Sometimes I have to make up my own stuff. The next night of the test was Friday. So every night they've been working for multiple hours every night. Friday night was when we had them do a bunch of different things that I wanted to watch them practice again. And then we finished with multiple attackers. Multiple attackers is like sparring one person at a time on steroids. It's like sparring on steroids that are also on steroids. It's really, really horrifying. So that's why I didn't let people stay for the last part of that unless they were actually participating in it, because it's kind of rough to watch. My Sifu says that the strengthening of the will is not a pretty sight. So some people have watched part of a really advanced test and quit because they think, I'll never be able to do that. And you're right, in that moment, you would never be able to do that. And that's what Dr. Utar Natchet said. The first black sash at Sifu Brown School in Michigan, he watched a red sash test and he quit. And Sifu Brown had to bring him back and talk him off the ledge and kind of explain the whole thing to him. And he came back and practiced and got his black sash. And incredible example of the reason why we don't let people watch the test beforehand, because it'll scare the hell out of you. So I'll just give you some numbers and you can do the math. They did multiple attackers where they defended themselves against 2 people. And then in the next round against 3 people. And then in the next round, this is 1 person versus 4 people, and then 5 people. And then when they had to defend against 6 people, I gave them a buddy. They got to spar with each other against the group of 6 attackers, which was really amazing to watch the way that they worked together. They only accidentally attacked each other a couple of times during that drill. It was really, really incredible. The mindfulness and the partner work, the high skill level of everybody involved was super apparent. I remember from my black sash test, this was the roughest part for me. I caught an errant hook punch to the ear and it perforated my eardrum because I had already had my eardrum perforated years before. And once it happens once, it doesn't fully heal. So it didn't take much. And it was the only time to this day that I had ever sworn in the dojo, well, in that dojo at least. And it happened, and I knew exactly what happened as soon as it did. And I said under my breath so that nobody could hear it, I was like, you B word. And it was a guy who punched me, so it was not misogynistic. The fun of getting like really laid out like that and then getting back up and continuing to go is incredible. So this is what I really got to see what they were made of, and they got to feel what they were made of by the end of that. So that was the roughest part of the test until Saturday, the demonstration on Saturday, which was really amazing. Some of you guys got to see them do some incredible stuff, and they practiced and showed us forms and all kinds of incredible drills. And then at the end, we finished with a break. The last physical thing that they did was a break. And we thought, and by we, I mean they, thought that they had broken a stack of 3 of these pieces of concrete before. And they probably had broken a thinner piece of concrete. The stuff that we use is like very difficult to break. So to break 1 piece is very, very tough. I don't think I've ever actually seen anybody break more than just 1 piece of this. And so when we tried to break 3, it didn't happen. And so they broke, Doug broke 1, and Steph, I have seen her break 1 of these pieces before. And she had just been through so much physically in that week, she was not able to do it in that moment. And then tried another break that involves even more skill. I was talking to one of the parents of one of the kids students earlier who had been there that day to see it. It's called an unsupported break. And I've actually seen Steph do that break as well before. It's so impossible because there's nothing supporting the piece of wood. It's just in the air. You drop it and you punch it, and your punch has to be so fast and so powerful that it basically like explodes the piece of wood in midair. It's really, really hard to do. And her hand was already hamburger meat from trying to the first break. So the second break didn't happen either, but she eventually got her break with the axe kick. But what I said that day is really one of the best takeaways from that moment in the entire test. There is no time in our practice where we will ever be beyond the challenge. There is always something that will challenge us. And I mean this as a black sash and now a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm challenged constantly. And it is part of my job to help you constantly be challenged, because this is the only way that you grow, is with that resistance, with something to push against. And what Steph showed is the ability to keep trying and keep going until she figured out a way to make it happen. And it would have been very easy to just stop and say, what you have done so far has been amazing. You can take a seat. But she just stood back up and tried something else and eventually made it work. And it's hard enough to do that on your own, let alone in front of like 100 people or however many people we had on the mats that day. Very, very impressive. And the attitude that it takes to get to this point in practice is something that, just like I said at the beginning of class, once you're there, it's like it's with you for the rest of your life. The black sash can't not black sash. And you see it in like everything that you do. The papers that they wrote and they read in front of us, and then Steph had a different paper that she read later on that night at the camisa ceremony, were so great. They had some truly memorable, incredible things to say. And it's honestly my favorite part of every test, I think, is to hear the why behind the practice. Because to show up and do all of the physical things that we do is a ton of fun. And that can certainly be a big part of the why you keep showing up to practice. But you're not going to do that for 18 years. No way. And you're not going to move from Colorado to LA to be a part of the dojo because it's just like fun to spar and grapple. No way. There's got to be something that touches you in a very deep, impactful way. And one of the sweetest things I've ever seen was Steph brought out this piece of paper that she saved from the first time that she called the dojo in Michigan, and wrote down the details of the class. And she must have just known in that moment, like, this is going to be something special. I don't have the piece of paper that I wrote the information down on. I do have my sashes, but I don't even think I have all of my certificates. And she saved it all these years, 18 years, and kept it in something and brought it out and showed us that day. And I thought, like, that's something in the moment to be able to tell, like, this is going to be something that's really going to be special. It's going to change my life. But to just keep that as like a memento, as a keepsake, was really, really sweet. And Saturday night we do this. It's like a secret ceremony that only some of the more senior students are invited to come to. It's called the camisa. It's where we honor the black sashes and we toast to the masters, that we have the pictures of the masters on the other side of this wall, and hear the black sashes speak, and have the old black sashes and the new black sashes speak. And it's a really incredible thing. I remember the first time I was invited to the camisa to Dr. Ujar Natchet's ceremony was like one of the most incredible, like, touching things that I had ever seen. And I remember every single one of them, all 13. It hasn't been 13 because I tested with 2 other people and Doug and Steph tested with 2 other people, but I want to say 9 or 10 camisas that I've been to. And each one is just as special and as incredible and as memorable as the last. So practice long enough, you'll be able to come to the camisa and see what that's all about later. So with all of these things that we do, even the days of the physical test, of course, the meditation class last Thursday, the camisa ceremony at the end, we always start these with a meditation. And with this one, we end with a meditation. And it's because meditation is an absolute core of our practice. Without the internal practice, without the mental discipline, it is not a martial art. So my Sifu always described this like, if you think of the physicality of our practice as like the color red, and the internal part of our practice, like meditation or Tai Chi or like energy work, is like the color yellow. Martial arts is not red and it is not yellow. It's not even red and yellow next to each other. It's orange. It's the blend of the two. That's why we have this orange pot. It's the only orange thing in the dojo besides our dots. But it's because every time I see that, I think of this idea. What we are doing is always a blend of body and mind. And this is what Zen is. Zen is basically using the mind and the body in the moment to be totally present, to completely dive into each breath. Like I've been talking about with the physical challenge this week of drinking enough water, you dive into the moment of just that sip of water. And this is what our practice teaches us to do. This is especially what our meditation practice teaches us to do and allows us to practice constantly, is being present. So we're going to meditate. It's going to be a shortish meditation because I really went off on a rant on this tonight. But you could be sitting for 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You could be sitting for 3 hours, which was what the black Sashes had to sit for their test. Each breath, if you think of it like an eternity of time or a whole lifetime passes from the beginning of the inhale to the end of the exhale. This is one really solid way to fully bring yourself into the moment. If you let it pass, it's like you're letting your life pass. And this is what most people who never get involved with a practice of mindfulness or meditation, and this was what my life felt like, and what most people say their life felt like before meditation, is it felt like life was just passing. And then you sit and you get this idea of being present and meditation and being mindful, and it's like I go from being a zombie to being magically brought to life. So as you sit to meditate, sit still, focus on your breath. When your mind wanders, remember that is life passing you by. Bring it back to this breath and sit comfortably. So when you sit, you can sit cross-legged or seiza. You can sit however you can sit comfortably. Just make sure that your spine is straight. Your knees are even with or below your hips. If your knees are sticking way up, then your legs are going to fall asleep. Your hands can be upturned together or separate, but kind of at your hips so that you're not slouching this way. You roll your shoulders back and relax. Your chin is parallel to the ground. Close eyes. Your eyes are slightly upturned as if you're looking at the third eye, the space between your eyebrows, but your eyes should not be crossed. So if you start to get a headache during meditation, it means that you're probably crossing your eyes. So instead, what you can do is either with your eyes open or just in your imagination, you can look off in the distance at a point that is slightly higher than your head. And then you'll be looking slightly up. And this physical posture, including the position of your eyes, is what we want to associate with a raised consciousness. It'll help us not fall asleep, be totally present and awake for our meditation. So from here, relax your body, relax your mind, and focus on the sensation of your breath. So rather than trying to manipulate your breath, just feel it. You can be like an outside observer, like you're watching somebody else breathe without judgment. Just aware of the inhale, aware of the exhale. If your mind wanders, if you have a persistent thought, you can just label it by saying to yourself in your mind the word thought. It's not good thought or bad thought. There's no judgment. You just recognize that's a thought. You set it aside and return back to the breath. Do that as many times as you need to.